Over the past several seasons, we've told the stories of children who couldn't read and the families and teachers who tried to help them inside systems that weren't built to succeed. We listened to the pain, we traced the history, we followed the science, and one truth kept rising to the surface. This is not a mystery, and it's no longer a debate. Reading failure harms children first, but responsibility does not stop there. In Season 4 of My Child Can't Read, A Heartland Crisis, we widen the lens to examine the state of literacy in Kansas and across America. This season begins with harm, the lived reality of children and families, and follows it upward through classrooms, policy, and institutions. Because when the evidence is clear, when solutions are proven, neutrality disappears. This is a season about what happens next, about the difference between knowing what works and taking responsibility for it. Welcome to Season 4, The State of Literacy. Welcome back to the State of Literacy in Kansas. In Episode 2, The Adults in the Middle, we hear from teachers, administrators, and community leaders navigating the pressures of a system that often constrains them. Together, these voices show what happens when adults care deeply, and yet the system limits their impact. Adults Care, Teachers on the Front Lines.
My name is Neal Zoglmann. I'm a middle school reading special education teacher from South Central Kansas. This is my third year in the classroom, and then prior to that, I did 3 years at the Center for Reading at Pitt State.
Wow.
Loved it there.
So do you work with Dr. David Herford then?
That's who I worked for, yeah. I consider him my science of reading mentor. That's really how I discovered the science of reading, because we know that higher ed has not always been the most consistent about teaching evidence-based reading instruction, and so I kind of was unlearning everything I was learning. Dr. Herford was completely helping me rewrite what I was being taught, essentially. So I was being taught things that I now know are outdated. Like, you know, I graduated in 2023 with my undergrad.
Okay.
And we did the Fontes and Pinnell. We did the leveled readers. We did the running records. I mean, I almost failed my intermediate ELA practicum because I couldn't place my kid. Because I did the word list, and if you don't know what that is, I envy you. I did my word list, and it said, you need to start at level J. And I'm like, okay, here's level J, kiddo, like, let's go. And then zoomed through level J. And then I'm like, level K, zoomed through it. I'm like, we're sitting at level R 3 weeks later. And it's like, buddy, you got to write a lesson plan, teach a lesson, or else you're not going to be able to pass this class. So I just had to wing something because... You know, it wasn't an evidence-based practice for identifying areas of weakness. You know, I still to this day don't know what that kid actually struggled with because I wrote a generic lesson based off a grade level standard. And what I was being taught was not what I was doing at the Center for Reading. It wasn't what I was being taught by Dr. Herford. You know, I think I spent more time in his office than I spent in my advisor's office, just unlearning and learning all of these great things.
Neal entered the classroom with good intentions, but his training hadn't prepared him for the most vulnerable learners. The tools he received didn't match the needs in the room.
I'm Michelle Schmidt, and I have taught for 34 years. I am the Title I teacher now at Skyline, and that's the last 3 years, so I spent 31 years in the regular classroom. And now I do AP with kids all day. I tell my principal all the time, I have the best job in the school. I really do. When you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
We know better. So we better do better. This is where lives are changed. And we're seeing it. You know, we're seeing where kids were failing, you know, kind of, I don't know, depressed, you know, to kids who are walking down the hall and they're talking to other people and, they're happy. And you're like, wow, that's not who I knew in third grade. This has made a difference, not just academically, but socially, and just their self-confidence, their self-worth has just gone up.
Kindergarten teacher Joyce Tiemanson describes herself as a victim of whole language and the teachings of Fountas and Pinnell, still being widely taught to recent teacher graduates like Neal Zoglmann. She reflects on how whole language methods failed her struggling students.
We weren't taught that there were different stages that kids had to go through to learn reading, that, rhyming is huge in the beginning process of reading, or syllables or sound manipulation. We weren't taught that. We weren't taught to sit down and tell kids, you've got to take the sounds and put them together. With whole language, you were taught, look at the picture. What sound does it start with? What word do you think would make sense there? So then you think about the students that you had, and there were those students that got it no matter what, and then there were those students who didn't. And I think about them and I think, oh wow, what damage did I do to those poor children who didn't get it, and who I wasn't giving those key skills to make better readers. So you have a little bit of regret that I didn't do it the right way. So yeah, definitely some things that we missed out on in our teaching education.
Joy started using the sound case 3 years ago after she attended a 2-day workshop at Phillips Fundamental Learning Center. The sound case is a phonics-based curriculum that builds a strong foundation for reading in any child aged 4 to 7, with each structured literacy lesson based around a classic children's book. Joyce was amazed at how well this science of reading-based instruction worked. Listen as Joyce tells a success story about one of her students who struggled to recall letter sounds. After using the sound case lessons, this student not only knew the sounds of the letters, but was also able to blend those sounds together to make words. This was all the proof Joyce needed to realize that if you teach a child to read the way the brain learns using structured literacy, that child can read.
I had a student, he struggled. He was young, and he had a lot of other things that were hindering his learning. And we were doing some blending of sounds, and I was calling on students to blend sounds together, and he raised his hand, and I thought, we'll let him try. We'll help him through. And he blended them, and I was dumbfounded because he was that student that struggled on just recalling the sounds. And so for him to be able to put it together to make a word was unbelievable. And it was like, wow. Okay, it's starting to make sense for him. And he could blend the sounds that he knew, and he could say the word. He could figure it out. If he didn't,
exciting.
It was. And he'd get excited and I'd get excited, because for a student that struggled as much as he did, that was a aha. This strategy really works, not just for the high or the mediums, but it's also working for those struggling students, and how important it is just to go with them where they're at and meet their needs. And that was my aha moment. This is doing what it needs to do.
Even when teachers care, gaps in their preparation leave some children behind. Adults care, but caring alone isn't enough. Adults learn training and the structural barriers.
My name is Dana Hensley. I have a bachelor's degree in secondary education with an emphasis in English and speech, and then I have a master's in curriculum and instruction. Back when I went to college, you really had to be a nurse or a teacher if you were a woman. So I joined the Department of Education at KU and found a home. I knew that that really was going to be a calling.
Dana was an educator for many years and met Janine Phillips at Collegiate during her years as principal there. For Dana, it was a godsend because her son Chad was diagnosed with dyslexia, and she had a support network through Janine's presence at Collegiate. Otherwise, Chad would not have learned to read, write, and spell.
I think the thing that has really surprised me the most and has been the most frustrating is the National Institute of Health did a deep dive into learning disabilities in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. We learned how to teach these kids how to read. And unfortunately, the education establishment just hasn't wedded themselves to that method. And consequently, we have so many children suffering because they can't read. And we all know that that lack of reading is a pipeline to prison. It leads to so many mental health problems. It leads to suicide. And they just so often can't be productive members of society, but could be if they just learned to read.
Now, looking back, what do you wish you'd known then about reading instruction and dyslexia?
Well, I just wish that I would have known the art of the science of reading, and I could have helped Chad a whole lot more. But again, I was so fortunate to have Janine and the teachers at Collegiate who had drunk the Kool-Aid and knew what to do with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
It makes me think even about now, we're still in this place of, I would call deficit.
Yeah.
We're in a crisis.
Very true.
Right. And our state is trying, and we've got letters that's come to a lot of different school districts. And then we've got these other avenues teachers can take by 2028
Right.
in order to get the seal of literacy. But even if you know it, how do we apply it?
Correct.
And so that whole piece is like,
yeah,
come on, don't just drink the Kool-Aid, use it,
Exactly.
But how?
But they don't often know how. And, it's not the teachers' faults because they are dedicated and really want their children to succeed.
Yeah.
But they just don't have the tools to know how to put it into place. They don't know what to do Monday morning.
Yeah.
They may understand the philosophy behind it better after some of these courses, but they don't know how to apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes my heart go out to them.
Dana's story reveals something many teachers quietly admit. They may understand the science of reading in theory, but knowing something and implementing it inside a school system are two very different things. And sometimes the gap begins much earlier in the way teachers themselves are prepared.
And I remember saying to my advisor, it's not just bad that this course is a part of the reading specialist program. What's almost worse to me is that it's now being required to be a part of the SPED program, because between reading specialists and SPED, we work with some of the most vulnerable learners, the most vulnerable readers, and we are not preparing SPED teachers correctly. We're not preparing intervention staff correctly.
Jamie Alford. I work at Friends University as Director of Graduate Workshops, and that, for people who don't know, is a section of Friends that is designed to provide graduate level coursework in workshop format, so condensed and intense, geared towards teachers who are recertifying for relicensure, moving up on the pay scale, or are working on their master's degree in education, and they can use those workshops as elective credits. Teachers aren't given enough credit for the amount that they care. Because I was in schools, they were low performing at the time, very high behavior, a lot of very at-risk behaviors of students, families, and the teachers go home with that burden. They go home with worrying about what's going to happen to this student. Are they going to have food? Then I always said this, I'm like, they're not toxic people, they're sad. They don't wake up every morning thinking I'm going to come and be angry, upset. They wake up every morning wanting to make a difference in a child's life.
Yeah.
And what I realized was they weren't giving the training to do it.
Adults care, adults learn, and knowing isn't enough. Sometimes the adults in the middle aren't inside the traditional system at all. Sometimes they're parents. Sometimes they're community leaders. Sometimes they're people with no formal education degree who simply refuse to accept that students should not enter any grade level behind in reading. In Western Kansas, Annalisa No didn't come through a college of education. Her degree is in business. She didn't plan to become a literacy reformer. But when nearly every child entering her micro school was behind in reading, she went looking for answers. And what she found changed everything.
My name is Annalisa No, and I'm the founder of Cardinal Academy, which is an innovative Christian learning environment that is a sort of a mashup between a traditional Christian school and a more creative micro school or hybrid homeschool program. In terms of my background, I was working in the business world in corporate consulting and doing all sorts of exciting things, but I just found myself in a position where I got involved in this conversation about what's happening with public education across the state of Kansas. And I jumped into it initially because I really just felt like there was an immediate problem that I had something to contribute to solving. And I thought that I would just do that one thing and then go on with my life and continue on with my plan to move out to LA and all the other things. I made the decision in June of 2024 to leave my full-time job. So when we started the program, 14 of our 16 students were behind grade level in reading. And this was really shocking to me. I had plans for the 4th through 8th grade class, right? I had a curriculum and a schedule and an idea about what that was going to look like. But when we got together on our first week, just to sit in a circle and read from a book out loud was extraordinarily painful for many of the students that were in the room. And when you get to be, 3rd and 4th grade and you're not reading well, it's a really emotional thing to have to go through because it's not like you can't read the room and sense that you ought to know how to sound these words out. So it's a really tragic experience for a young student to have to go through. And I was very, very surprised by that. I was very confused. I was very worried and instantly felt the need to search out what is happening and how did this happen and why is it happening? The most important resource that I found while I was trying to discover what was happening was the Soul to Story podcast by Emily Hanford. So the Soul to Story podcast was super enlightening and also enraging. And I binge listened to the whole thing because as soon as I tuned in and she started talking and connecting the dots on some of these stories that I had loosely heard about, the reading wars, No Child Left Behind, the money in publishing companies, it just started to click in ways that made so much sense. And I kept getting more and more angry the more that I was listening to it because it felt so exactly what you would expect it to be and exactly as terrible as you can imagine it could possibly be. So the process that I went through was I sat down side by side with this reading interventionist and just asked her to train me in the process of teaching a kid how to read. And as we went through those phonics rules, maybe 4 to 5 different little things that you could do to teach the rule and then reinforce the rule and enable the student to practice the rule. And so as we started that process, I kept thinking to myself, it's going to get more complicated, right? Next week is going to be harder. And we get, 6 weeks into this little 1 hour per week structure. And she's like, okay, and now you've gone through all of the phonics rules. And so this is the majority of the instruction. You might have to go back to some of these at some point if a student doesn't get it. Some of these might need reinforcement. And it might take students a while before it really cements in the brain. And I'm like, but this is it. That's it. That's when I really started to think about this problem really, really differently. You don't need a 4-year degree in order to learn these things. You really just need to spend some time and attention breaking these things down. And I would argue that they're very specific things, but they're not complex in nature. Something that I believe any retired person could get the hang of, any regular average working person could get the hang of, whether you've worked with students before, whether you've been in a classroom before or not. And so, the idea that a school would just continue to pass someone up and through and hope that it works itself out it's a tragedy. Mm-hmm. It's a huge, huge tragedy. Yeah. And I can cry and I would pray for every single person who's going through that. And again, from the outsider perspective, getting a better understanding of what it takes to really solve it. For those older learners who didn't have any other learning deficiencies, within 12 weeks, their life was changed. 12 weeks, 20 to 30 minutes per day, the trajectory of those students' lives are absolutely turned around. Behavior issues, no longer. Family issues, everything's changed. The entire dynamic has changed because the child isn't screaming, fighting, hiding, running, crying. And the 12-week hypothesis may or may not prove to be true for the younger learner, 5, 6, 7. But certainly if you have someone who's 8, 9, 10, heaven forbid, 11, 12, who's still struggling, when we sit down with those learners and we give them the same type of instruction, the light bulbs are instant.
Like many parents and educators across the country, Annalisa found herself listening late at night to a podcast that would shake the foundations of how reading had been taught for decades. Emily Hanford's investigative series, Sold a Story podcast, exposed the disconnect between reading research and classroom practice. And for Annalisa, it was the beginning of action. Annalisa's story isn't about rebellion, it's about urgency. If a non-traditionally trained adult can learn the mechanics of reading instruction in weeks, what does that say about how long we've made this process for teachers? Adults care, adults learn, adults outside the system act. And yet, inside traditional systems, implementation still stalls. Adults try, teacher agency under pressure. But inside traditional school systems, teachers often don't have the same freedom to change course, even when they know something isn't working. Former administrator Bunny Hill saw this tension firsthand.
Hi, my name is Bunny Hill, and I'm a 45-year teacher and educator and happy to be here. I would give anything to go back to the beginning of my career with the knowledge I have now. Because I know the names of the kids that I would have been able to change their lives, and I wasn't. Mm-hmm. I didn't get it. In fact, I saw somebody at a cocktail party one night, and she said, I asked how her son was doing. He was someone who ended up not staying at collegiate.
Okay.
And she said, I know that you thought he was dumb, but he's an engineer now. And I thought, I never thought he was dumb, but that's clearly the way it felt to the child and the parent when they weren't successful in my room, in my classroom. So I'd love to go back and fix that.
Yeah.
Because that would, of course, not have been what I was trying to do.
Well, then there's that whole thing with teachers and I didn't know what I didn't know, and then having to move on with grace and
you still
change.
You taught me what I didn't know, but by the time that Janine was at the school and that we were beginning to learn, and I was beginning to learn other things, I was already in an administrative position by that time.
Okay.
So I could make changes without, if collegiate's not a public school, nobody has to agree. Mm-hmm. We just decide overnight, we want to do this, we want to do that. I'm going to have the teachers do this if I'm the principal. Nobody is telling us not to. And that's one of the beauties of being in a school like this one or collegiate. And I loved it from the day I got to school. Nobody told me what to do in class. I had the books, but nobody said you have to be on page 76 today.
Right.
Nobody said you have to do it this way. Uh-huh. And so depending on the kids I had, I could do it the way it worked from the beginning. So by the time I was an administrator, if there was a better idea, I could show up tomorrow at the faculty meeting and say, we're going to try this. And we did. Not like it was easy, but as people began to see that it worked and embraced it, then we began to institutionalize some of the things that we knew were the best practices to be using, now that we knew something more. Well, there's this bureaucracy piece. You're supposed to be on page 72 today. That is the truth.
Lockstep.
You're not supposed to take to divert into this question that John had yesterday that everybody got interested in. You've got to be on 75. And so the structure's set, and it's hard to break that.
Yeah.
Even if you have a young teacher with great ideas.
Yeah.
Whose voice you actually should probably want to hear, because that's the only voice that represents the kids in her classroom. Only person who has eyes on those children and who could say, they're not learning.
Yeah.
I need to try something different. What are the next 3 different things I should try so they will learn?
Yeah.
That should always be the question for every teacher, but when the structure's set up so that isn't the way it works, years go by and it doesn't get changed.
So you're finding need in reading, you write a goal for that need, that specific need. If a child can't comprehend, you need to be assessing down. So you need to be looking, ooh, can they read fluently? Ooh, they weren't very accurate on that fluency measure. Can they decode? Uh-oh, cannot decode. I probably shouldn't write them a comprehension goal because the area of need is decoding. I need to be teaching them to decode the words so that then they can eventually become more automatic, so they can eventually comprehend what they're reading.
They don't get diagnosed till they're 8 or 9, which we didn't follow through with that because I already knew he had the issues. After doing the research, I had told my husband if he can't process what he's hearing, he's not going to be able to learn to read in a traditional school setting. And you have to be able to read to do every single subject. And I was not going to put him in a situation where he was going to fail. I also did not want to put him in a situation where he was trying to learn one way and it wasn't working. So he's frustrated all day. And then he comes home and goes to a tutor. I think a lot of parents just didn't have the funds in order to help their children if they figured out that they needed some help. I think a lot of parents want to live in denial, and you've got to push yourself through that in order to help your kids. A lot of times the children that do get help are the parents that have the money to do that. And it significantly upsets me that you shouldn't have to have money to be able to learn to read. I believe that to my core, like so much I could start crying right now. Like I just really, really believe that.
Sometimes the adults in the middle try to solve the problem themselves. Teachers search for better methods, parents advocate, and occasionally a community steps in to fund a solution. Adults fund and implement the Downing Project. In Wichita Public Schools, USD 259, reading scores at several elementary schools had flatlined. Teachers were progress monitoring. They were reteaching. They were using leveled readers and phonics programs already in place. And still, some students were making zero growth. So, the community stepped in. Local philanthropist and business owner Barry Downing funded a structured literacy pilot, the Alphabetic Phonics Program, in multiple USD 259 elementary schools. It cost the district nothing. Language specialists from the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center came in to teach students who were not responding to traditional instruction.
It's about kids. So I felt like this project was that. So I'm gonna say that from the get-go. So it actually started when I was assistant principal. And from my understanding at that time, because it literally was like, came in as like, yeah, they're gonna come in and they're gonna put these walls up in these buildings, and these dyslexia teachers are gonna come in and work with our low performing kids. And in those days, sometimes things would happen in a rush in the district, and you didn't get a lot of background information before it came out. It was just like, is this coming next week? Now, I knew we had low reading test scores. So I was like, yay, sounds good. What's this? Don't know what it is, but I'm going to trust. We have a lot of kids that just flatlined because now we had more data, right? So now we had data processes. We had progress checks. We had all these things. And we're like, this isn't working. I'm like, okay, we go and we analyze the data, and we're sitting in there and we go back and we reteach, we scaffold learning, we're doing this. Okay, we're doing this leveled reader, and we're doing this phonics program. And these kids flatline, not even barely moving. To which you're like, hey, if you're barely moving, we're making some progress.
Yeah.
Flatline, we're making zero, not working. And then I felt a push for a lot of people wanting to put people in special ed. And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like we're not doing something that's not working for them. Serving the same children with the same goal, not separate goals, same goal, helping kids. And it was fabulous because what did we start seeing? These kids that flatlined were not flatlining. And guess what? It wasn't special education or an IEP that did it. It was coming in and just teaching them differently, teaching them structured, teaching them a way that for their brains and how they were uniquely made, which is really good for everybody. So when we've got the data, because it was the classroom teachers who were doing the progress monitoring, right? So they're like, look, little Johnny made this huge leap. And I'm like, so then I'm showing Janine, we're showing everybody, and literally it's like tears. Everybody was at some point in tears. Grateful, not you did and I didn't. That wasn't the mentality of people.
The competition wasn't there.
No.
It worked.
And having conversations with them and asking, how does this work? And why is this happening? And what do you think about this? That Janine and I had like all of these cool conversations about how great would it be if we could train your kindergarten teachers on this, right? Because it really could be a tier, at the time, it was called like a tier 1 instructional model. We were using it as a tier 3, like intensive care unit. Right? There's something really wrong with you, so we're using this approach. Versus, it's actually just a great approach. It's brain-based. It goes with all the things. And maybe if we taught it down here in this huge tier 1, you wouldn't have as many kids that need tier 3 later on. So we would have all these great conversations. And I learned so much from her and the people that came in, and it was going well. And then one day it was like just the rug pulled out from everybody. Janine came in tears to my office. And word for word, it was so many years ago, I couldn't tell you, but essentially was, I'm so sad, I'm so mad, I'm so heartbroken. I just went to a meeting and the district is pulling it from all schools. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, who do I need to call? Who do I, like, thinking all of a sudden I have power, right? No, I'm just like a little principal. But I'm like, I just don't like injustice. And I felt like this was an injustice that was going to be done. It almost makes me want to cry to this day because it was so devastating to me. And like, why would we pull something that's working that we're not paying for? Now, am I wise enough to know that I don't know everything? Yes. But from my point of view at that time, what I felt was Janine's point of view at that time was, this is confusing. Why would we pull something that's working in a school that's a turnaround school that is getting like states coming in to look at things like it's working? It's gonna be worked up now because I can almost see the faces of some little kids that are just like so excited because they can now read like a little book.
Yeah.
Because you know what kids know when they can't read? Kids know when they're going out to a special teacher. Kids know when everyone else is reading what's on the board and reading the thing and they're staring and it makes no sense. They feel I'm stupid. You're not stupid. You're just wired differently. Like God just made you this fabulous person you are. And you're a square peg in a round hole at the school, but we gave them their space. You're not different. We're all going different places. This is just the new place you're going. You're great at art. Okay, so now you go get help with this. This person can't draw a stick figure, and they would kind of chuckle. And I'm like, so stop. Let's just go. And now it's taken, and it's gone. And then one day, it just was all pulled.
And why?
So we'll never know what was the reason behind that? But as we all know, if we don't have that push from above, we can't do it. And that's what's really frustrating too, to have the taste of something that works so well and to have conversations of how can we support teachers?
Adults care. Adults learn. Adults try. Adults fund. Adults implement. And still, the system can stop it. Moral escalation and responsibility ladder. If teachers care, if principals advocate, if communities fund solutions, and children are still left behind, then who is actually holding the power? At Phillips Fundamental Learning Center, we know that when adults care, learn, and act, kids' lives are changed. You just heard the story of the Downing Project, a community-funded program that helped children finally read with confidence. Programs like this only happen because people like you choose to support PFLC. Your gift funds assessments, tutoring, and teacher training that give every child a chance to succeed. And you can see this impact firsthand at our 18th annual garden party on Friday, May 18th, here on our 24-acre campus. Celebrate with us. Enjoy live music, auctions, and springtime fun, all in support of our mission. All kids reading, all kids succeeding. Learn more and get your tickets at funlearn.org/garden or give us a call, 316-684-7323. Thanks for listening to My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis. If today's episode resonated with you, if you saw yourself, your child, or your classroom in these stories, you're not alone. We believe every child can learn to read, and every parent and teacher deserves the knowledge to help them. I invite you to take action today by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode, rate and review to help others find this series, and tell us about your story and discover how the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center is changing lives through literacy at funlearn.org/podcast. That's funlearn.org/podcast. And share this show with a friend, teacher, or fellow parent who needs to hear it. All resources, source credits, and tools mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. Remember, together we can rewrite the story, one reader at a time, right here in the Heartland.